Now, campaigners from the tainted blood scandal, they're claiming that, just get this, 10 out of 4,000 claims have had compensation so far. And that's despite pledges from both the Conservatives and Labour to resolve payment this year and recommendations from an inquiry report by Brian Langstaff that a comprehensive scheme should be set up with immediate effect to pay victims. Now, to cast your minds back, 3,000 people died as a result of contaminated blood throughout the 70s and 80s, and many survivors were left with traumatic, life-changing conditions. One of the victims, Andy Evans, he's also the chair of the Tainted Blood campaign. He's here with me now to tell us more. Andy, thanks for coming on the show, mate.
Afternoon, Geoff. How are you?
I'm very well, mate. Thank you. Can you just remind us overall how many people were impacted? We've obviously got the number of people that have died, but overall, how many people does this relate to?
So the inquiry statistics expert group estimated that a potential 30,000 people were infected with either HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, or all three. And that they were infected over a period within the late 70s up to the early 90s. And 3,000 of those have now died. And out of the HIV cohort of around about 1,250, there's only 200 left, and I'm one of them.
I mean, that is one of the sad tragedies of this, is that because of the delays, is that potentially, actually people are now dying without seeing justice.
Well, that's right. I mean, we're still seeing deaths at this point in the scandal of up to 2 per week. So the impact of this continues. I mean, it's not a historic tragedy, historic scandal by any means. It's continuing to this day. We're seeing, the delays that we're seeing at the moment are having real world impacts upon the victims and their families, in that, we're 40 years down the line now from the initial infections, and not only are the infected people dying, but their relatives as well, who will never see any form of compensation.
I suppose, with the high-profile post office scandal, that famous ITV drama which brought it into the public consciousness, did you feel at that point that the wind was with you in terms of the strength of your argument, and with a new incoming government, that there would be a difference and that there would be significant movement this year?
Absolutely. I mean, the post office scandal was good for us in a way. Their publicity enabled the media to start talking about other scandals, including our own. Which was good. And we also had around the same time, the prospect of the infected blood inquiry reporting in May of this year. And when that report came out, it was absolutely damning. It was everything that we've been saying for the past 30 years of campaigning, written down by a judge, an ex-High Court judge, and, put into law. And we expected at that point that, our campaigning was coming to an end, that we'd have an easy ride now to finally get justice for the victims. Unfortunately, it's proving not to be the case.
I mean, the original ruling was that they wanted to get all of the claims settled by the end of 2024. And is this correct, that at the moment the number sits at around 1/4%? Is that accurate?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, around 10 people at this point have been offered compensation. They initially started the compensation rollout by asking 17 people to go through the process so that they could take it slowly, apparently, and learn from it. 16 of those have responded and made their applications, and only 10 of those so far have been paid out. And that's despite the inquiry's second interim report in April 2023, which recommended that the compensation panel was set up immediately and started paying towards the end of that year. We're a year down the line from that deadline, and now only 10 people have been offered compensation.
I think most people would agree that is an absolutely dismal figure. I mean, is it a case of successive governments sort of recognising that there is a moral and a legal case to this? But are they? I'm trying to think of reasons why they're pushing it into the long grass. Is it hoping that it'll eventually be somebody else's problem? Because we are talking about quite a lot of money here. What's your hunch on why this hasn't happened at a greater pace?
I think you've nailed it with the money argument. I think the longer they drag this out, the immediate cost isn't due. And to be honest, we've suspected for a long, long time that the longer this goes on, obviously, the more people will die and the less people will be able to benefit from compensation. For the affected, that's actually true. we have elderly parents and partners, bereaved partners, whose compensation will die with them. So if they don't manage to get a claim in time, their estates aren't eligible for compensation, and that's just written off the overall bill. So the longer that they can take to do this, I'm sorry to say, but the less they'll have to pay.
I mean, there was a meeting recently in which some victims groups... were you present at that meeting?
I wasn't, I was away, but we did send somebody from Tainted Blood, yeah.
And there were some reports coming out of that the victim groups felt that they were being treated like a nuisance. And if you put this in tandem with the broken pledge of the government to the WASPI women, is this a good start with a government that was supposed to, or I guess anticipated to be more compassionate than their predecessors?
It's not a good start. It was expected after the final report came out that there would be more of an air of complicity with the recommendations, that there would be more engagement with the community. But what we've seen so far to this point from the Paymaster General and the Cabinet Office is lip service, really. They're ticking boxes. They're having these meetings, talking at us, announcing things that they've decided already, giving us maybe 2 to 4 minutes to speak each, and then just completely ignoring what we say anyway. It's really difficult to get any information from them, and also, our suggestions seem to be falling on deaf ears. And it's quite important that the community at this stage, after all the fighting that we've had to do, is listened to, so that this can be resolved properly once and for all. We don't want to be fighting for the next 40 years.
I mean, given your experiences trying to get compensation, if you look at things like Hillsborough and the post office, do you end up concluding that this country has a specific issue dealing with institutional historical grievances?
It certainly does, and that came out in the inquiry's final report, that the duty of candour that we expect from government is just not there. And there's also a defensive culture within both the government and within the civil service that was demonstrated in all of the scandals that you mentioned. And so, as part of the recommendations from the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff noted that those should change as a matter of urgency. We need that defensive culture to be taken away. And if we hadn't had that defensive culture from the beginning, we probably wouldn't be here right now talking about this. They'd have sorted it out back in the early days in the 80s and 90s. But, here we are at the end of quite a long cover-up. And it seems that that's the case for a lot of scandals going forward at the moment.
OK, Andy, thanks so much for coming on the show. That was Andy Evans, the chair of the Tainted Blood campaign.